Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden Wilcrone. Aiden, I see you're already smiling. Obviously,
Yeah.
this isn't going to be the cheeriest of reaction videos after what went down yesterday in Piscataway. Michigan State literally grabbing defeat out of the jaws of victory. And so, we're here to react to it. We're here to talk about it. We're here to talk about the future of the program as well. And we will get into some basketball too, just to kind of end maybe on a lighter note and a happier note because, we'll get to that. So, Aiden, it seems like kind of a ridiculous question, but take me through your process of watching the game, because, for me, those first three quarters, it looked like Michigan State's most complete performance of the year. Probably their best performance of the year through those three quarters. When you consider the fact that those first two wins were against teams that were group of five opponents or an FCS opponents in Richmond's case, and then it all kind of fell in on itself there. But I guess during the first three quarters, what were you feeling? What were you seeing? And then give me your reaction to what happened afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, Caden Hauser gets his first start. They announced, there were kind of rumblings, and a lot of people kind of assumed even after the Iowa game that it was going to be him. And then it was official about an hour or so before the game that Hauser was going to get his first start. And, you watch the first half, obviously, he gets a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. He kind of leads some decent drives there. They move the ball right, and then defense, holds them to 2 field goals. I think they were up 17-6 at half. I think Rutgers missed a field goal as well. So, you feel pretty confident that, considering the weather, you got a 2-possession lead going into halftime. The weather is getting worse as the game went on. And so you're thinking ball control, that can help you win the game and everything. And then, you get to that fourth quarter and it's I think it was 24-13 with 10 minutes left. And all you're thinking is just control the ball. You get one more touchdown or even a field goal, and you're up 27 to if you get to 27 points, you're pretty comfortable that, Rutgers hasn't been moving the ball well, and, you just keep the clock ticking and you're good to go. That's a win. And, it just completely fell apart at the seam. And, the special teams spotted them 14 points. If we're being honest, obviously they couldn't get 7 guys on the line, and then they make them repunt, and then it turns into a touchdown immediately, and then the lining up for the onside kick, which MSU lined up for an onside kick after Rutgers scored at halftime, I think, something like that, or right after Rutgers' first touchdown after halftime. They line up for an onside kick, and they kick it deep, and then they line up for an onside kick again, and then they just bounce it over, hit it over their heads, and then Tyrell Henry doesn't field it, and it's just all downhill from there. And it was just a poor ending, just all around. I really don't know what I want to say is Caden Hauser did play well, and I thought the offense put up 27 points, which is more than you can ask for, considering watching the last 3-4 games. That 27 points is a win in my book, but once you look at the rest of the game, it's hard to be positive about anything.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think, Caden Hauser comes in and, he leads that first drive right down the field, touchdown. I think it was their first opening drive touchdown of the season. And really throughout the first half, just a lot of poise, was patient in the pocket, avoiding the big mistake. playing really well. And actually, I mean, at halftime, I think a lot of people were thinking like, how is this guy not the guy, all season long type of deal. As far as, and then I want to speak to the defense a little bit too, because I thought the defense played really well. The worst drive of the game for the defense was probably, right after Rutgers gets the snap on the punt that Michael O'Shaughnessy goes right through his hands, goes in the end zone. Rutgers scores. Offense goes 3 and out. And then, Rutgers best drive of the game came right after that when they got the touchdown, got the 2-point conversion, makes it an 8-point game. Other than that drive, though, Michigan State's defense was very stout. Michigan State had 2 fumbles earlier in the game with wide receivers fumbling, and the defense steps up and gives up 0 points off of those 2 turnovers. Like stiffened up in the red zone a couple times, or at least on their half of the field a couple times, forced field goals to keep Michigan State the lead. So the defense, did its job. As different people are saying in the comments, it was 2 special teams errors that gave it away. I'm glad you brought up the onside kick formation that you're throwing out there with 8 minutes left. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit more with my burning questions, but just a total and complete and utter collapse. No doubt about it. And a devastating way I feel like Michigan State's bowl hopes went down the drain with that loss. And for it to go down that way, really disappointing. Obviously, we'll dig into it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I throw up my 3 up, 3 down immediately after the game. And usually in a loss, sometimes it's tough to find the positives, or if a team wins by a significant amount, it's tough to find the negatives. But this one, it did seem like it was easy to do both, because again, for 3 quarters, Michigan State was in a pretty good spot, had played pretty well, and those things stood out. I think I had Katenhauser as a positive. The rush defense for our, I can't remember exactly what I had off the top of my head here, but there was a lot of positive takeaways, and then it all fell in on itself. So, I guess, is there any other things you want to point out about the game itself before we get into burning questions? I think our burning questions will probably answer a lot more about the game. So, anything else before we get started?
No, we can get into the burning questions.
Let's dig right into it. I'll get us started here. And it might be hard to boil it down like this, but can you give me just one word to describe yesterday's loss, and why would you choose that word?
Oh man, I would. Oh, that's tough, because you're like there's not really. I'm trying to think right now.
Well, while you think, why don't I give my word?
Okay,
and then I'll let you
give your word.
Build off that. So, unfortunately, and here's Cameron McGregor jumps in with pathetic as his. JR has heartbreaking as his one word. The word I would use, and it is going to focus on that 4th quarter, unfortunately, but that's the story of the game, is debacle. Debacle is the word that I use, and I even looked up debacle, the definition of debacle, and I found a sudden and disgraceful failure or a fiasco. And a sudden and disgraceful failure is what I feel like encapsulates the start of that 4th quarter. It was sudden and it was disgraceful how it went down. So that was the word that I chose. Just really unfortunate. I do feel for the players. I've said that a lot over these last 4 or 5 weeks, because I just feel like they're not being put in the position to succeed. So that's the word I go with. Hopefully, maybe that'll help you jog something. I don't know. Do you have anything?
I guess I would say just avalanche. It was just it started well, and you get the second half, you get that second touchdown and everything. You got 24 points on the board, and you're pretty confident with 2-score lead, and it just fell apart. It happens, but it seems like we watch it every close game. This happens, and every game it's not close. It's a Washington or a Maryland where it's a 3-score loss, but it feels like it came down to, 3 to 4 plays that really changed the game and turned it all around.
Sure. No, I like the word avalanche too, because it happened so quickly, and it was like once the dam broke on the punt snap, it was like there was no stopping it, and it was just one thing right after another. So no, that's a good word too. I think we described it pretty well there. So all right, give me your first burning question, and we'll move on.
All right. My first burning question is Jonathan Kim Michigan State's best player right now?
That's a great question, because Bryce Behringer, you could argue, was the best player last year.
Yeah.
I would, Jaden Reed when he was healthy and things like that, but he's definitely Michigan State's most consistent player. I don't think I have any trouble saying that at all. He's been good. I'm just thinking back to like before the season began, Cameron McGregor's in the comments here, and he would ask a lot about who's the kicker going to be? Who's the kicker going to be? Well, they got a kicker. The problem is everything around the kicker is inconsistent at best, I would say. So, I think you're right. I think Jonathan Kim is the most consistent player.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he's been, kind of the light the last couple weeks, just, against Iowa. He made that long kick going into halftime. He's done his job, and he's missed, I think like 2 or 3 on the season, but he's been big for them in a lot of ways.
Yep. No, I agree with you. All right, I'll move on to my next burning question. There's probably a few different directions we can go here, but this is kind of why I have it as a question. Who's the most to blame for Saturday's fourth quarter meltdown?
I have a similar question that I'll get to, but I would say, I mean, it really comes down to the special teams, spotting them 14 points, and it's really that. It's really as simple as that. And like you mentioned, the defense played well, and Rutgers had that long like 85 yard drive, and besides that, the defense played really well. And even then, that drive took a lot of time. They made them work for it, and it really, MSU struggled to arm tackle. They didn't get them in third down situations. Rutgers moved the ball consistently. They never got to like third down situations where they were, behind schedule and such. So it really comes down to special teams, though. That was embarrassing.
Yeah, no, who's the most to blame? I got to go with Ross Ells. He's the special teams coordinator. We've talked about him in the past, and mostly not for good reasons. I know like one conversation we had about, Ross Ells in a previous podcast, we talked about like the mixed dynamic of special teams last year, where the kicking game was a mess. But we kind of made not an excuse, but like we gave a reason, Hank Pepper not being around. That was the long snapper being, that was part of it. We praised Bryce Behringer and all of that, but I'm done giving Ross Ells credit for Bryce Behringer. I'm just going to say Bryce Behringer was credited for Bryce Behringer, so that's kind of where I'm at this point. I think he's the guy that I point to. And again, his unit is the one that now Ross Ells isn't the one like looping up Michael O'Shaughnessy's hands and making sure he loses the ball or things like that. So but the lining up on the onside kick, the formation getting messed up when you get a clean punt off, but the formation's messed up. And that's not the first time things like that have happened with the special teams. It seems like there's been multiple occasions where you can't get lined up correctly. That goes to the guy who's running the show for the unit, and that's Ross Ells. So yeah, I'm with him as well. I did want to like double back a little bit because Cameron McGregor brings up a good point about the rush defense in that fourth quarter. I touched on this in my 3-up, 3-down. It was one of my 3 downs was the rush defense late, but I think a lot of this was just like the psyche. Rutgers had that nice drive to cut it to 3 points. They ran the ball pretty effectively there. And then you get the sudden change with the failure to recover the kickoff. And, one play later, that's 21 yards right there on the single play. So not making an excuse for the defense, but I feel like they did play pretty well up to that point. And, maybe it was a psyche thing that it was just like, oh, here we go again. And you kind of saw it in the body language a little bit too. So just wanted to address that. All right. Go ahead and hit me with your next burning question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of just goes into that. Like, what do you do with Ross Els here? Like, where do you go from here just in terms of the special teams unit? Because, you look at last game against Iowa, where they give up a punt return late. And then you look at this game where, they fumble the fumble, the kickoff being recovered by Rutgers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just one game. It's not an isolated incident. It is, it looks bad. And, like you said, Bryce Behringer last year, even Jaden Reed last year and, 2 years ago he kind of held down the fort in terms of the kick return and the punt return game. And then you have Behringer, who, is Bryce Behringer. And now it just feels like the same thing with Jonathan Kim, where it's like, you just brought in a proven player, Jonathan Kim, who's been at North Carolina, who started at North Carolina, and you brought in kind of, a proven guy. So it feels like there's not a lot of credit to be taken here. So I guess where do you go from there in terms of, is there a coaching, move from here? Is it being fired? Is it moving the position? I know he was a linebackers coach at one point, or a nickelbacks coach, kind of what needs to happen to improve this?
Right. So, we've talked about this a little bit in over the past couple of weeks too, because, Tucker obviously Mel Tucker was fired unceremoniously, and then just the sudden change and shakeup that caused. You can see why you wouldn't want to just start launching coaches, out of the program, just because these players need structure. So I totally get the frustration with Ross Els, and that people are done with him and would like to see him fired. I don't think you fire him, but if there's anybody, an analyst or somebody who has some experience with special teams or whatever it is, maybe just take those duties from him and put him in somebody else's plate for the rest of the season, or at least bring somebody in alongside to say, okay, how can we get this stuff fixed? Because clearly, with the unit, he's in over his head a little bit with the unit, it seems like. So you got to shake up something. Again, I don't think you dismiss the guy, just because you want to keep things as together as you can for the rest of this season. I know that sounds crazy given what we've seen over the last 4 weeks, but I think it's important. But yeah, you got to bring in some help, because it's to the point now where it can't go on this way. So that would be, I guess, my answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a thing that Harlan Barnett, as an interim coach, can go to Mark D'Antonio for reference, because, Mark D'Antonio's special teams, they weren't like Frank Beamer level, like crazy good, but they were consistent and there weren't, a ton of issues there. So, that's a thing where I know Harlan Barnett is the interim and he might not be the next head coach, but for the remainder of this season, that is where you got to go for reference and say, hey, we're halfway through the season. What do you do in this instance with, another coach where, there's clear issues that, everyone sees. So kind of looking for reference there. And like you said, if there's an analyst or someone else, in the program that has even the slightest bit of experience, you got to go to them and say, hey, what do you think you can do differently here? Or kind of just at the, when you're having your roundtable discussion on, Sunday mornings with the whole staff, it's kind of saying, hey, I'm open, all ears. Like, what can we do to improve this?
Yeah, I got you. I want to give like a quick little shout out. We have a Mindy Duplain in the comments, and based on the profile picture, I'm thinking there might be some relation to JD Duplain. As far as her comment, I thought the pass protection was pretty good in this last game. Kaiten Hauser was sacked once, but that one seemed like more of a coverage sack. It seemed like, again, this is just off of recollection from like the one, time I watched the play, but it seemed like the pocket was okay there and he kind of stepped up and, lost a couple yards. But no, I thought, offensive line played pretty well as far as pass protection. It was tough to get some things going in the run game. We've talked about that as well. Jalen Berger, I thought, stood out and had his best performance of the season. I think Rutgers was probably keyed in on Nate Carter quite a bit, but just want to give a shout out to Mindy Duplain. Thanks for joining us in the show. All right, I just wanted to look through Steven, time for a change with the special teams, understandable. Yeah, a lot of that, Carrie Ellis says, tear off the Band-Aid. I get it. I understand the frustration, and I certainly, even though I have the whole opinion of, I don't want to be just launching people out of the program, but I totally, like, I'm not going to die on that hill. Like, so I get it. So, Cameron, I played 1 year of basketball in college, so I've got some college eligibility, and I don't know about Aiden, but I think he's got some eligibility left too. I don't know.
I could do a grad transfer, and that's about it.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know what position I would play though. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't help with special teams because I can't kick a ball at all. That's not my strong suit. So. Moving on to my next burning question. This is not a very pleasant question, but I'm going to go with it anyway. And the question is, Aiden, what will Michigan State's final record be in 2023? And to kind of set the stage a little bit, Michigan State went 3-9 in 2016. That was the fewest wins for the program in a non-COVID season. Since going 0-11 in 1994. That was George Perlis's last year. So again, based on what we've seen, especially these last 2 weeks, when you outplay your opponent for the majority of the game, it seems, and you still can't find a way to get the job done. So when you look at the schedule that's ahead, we know about the 3 top 10 teams still on the schedule, but it comes down more so to the Nebraska, Indiana, and
Minnesota.
Yeah. So give me your thoughts. What does the final record look like?
I hate being the glass half empty guy. I hate being, I picked MSU to win this weekend too. And I felt confident, and I felt confident there's still a path to a bowl game. Yeah. Coming off a bye week, you can see that. But at this point, I want to say 4-8 and say that they get 2 wins between Indiana and Indiana, Nebraska, Minnesota. Yeah. But it's hard to be optimistic because don't get me wrong, I do think that Rutgers team is a decent team, and probably if they played Minnesota, they could beat them, and they play Indiana next week, and that clinches their bowl eligibility, right. Obviously after beating MSU. So I'm not trying to say, Rutgers is a bad team, because they are a tough team. They're not in that upper echelon of Big Ten teams, obviously, but, they are a half decent team. They're good enough to make a bowl game. So, but for that reason, I still, it's hard to say more than 4 wins right now. I think it's 4-8, 3-9.
Yep. No, I'm kind of with you there. Before the season started, a lot has happened before the season started, but I looked at that Minnesota game on the road, and I thought that was a gettable game. I still feel that way, just because we saw in the first 3 quarters against Rutgers, like, what this team could be if they do play clean. And frankly, it wasn't even that clean. They had 2 fumbles in those first 3 quarters, but you kind of saw that against the middle of the road Big Ten teams. You could see like where they kind of stack up, is I guess the point I'm trying to make. So I still think they could win all 3 of those games. It's hard for me to sit here and expect them to. Indiana's really bad, like really bad. So I expect them to win that game. Call me naive, I guess, if you will, but Indiana's really bad. So it comes down to Nebraska and Minnesota. Nebraska's at home. Minnesota's on the road. And I'm not sure which of those teams is better right now. I'm actually maybe even leaning towards Nebraska a little bit. I'm like, maybe Matt Rule is getting a little bit of momentum there. I think they were off this last week, so it's kind of hard to say. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm thinking 4-8. I think they'll get 2 of them. I think they'll beat Indiana and win one of either Minnesota and Nebraska. That's where I'm at. So I think they can avoid that 3-9 from 2016, but I'm not overly confident in that. So yeah, tough question there, but I feel like it had to be asked. So we'll move on to your next one.
All right. I guess I was gonna say, watching the game, did it look like Hauser was limited in terms of play calling a little bit? I think, he did, throw for 2 touchdowns. I think his stats were, I think he was 18 for 29 with, he was 18 for 29 with 133 yards. So it was kind of a lot of short stuff. I know the weather conditions played a factor, but it still looked like he was a little bit limited. I guess what did you see out of that?
Yeah, no, when I was after the game, when I was like, filling in my stats on the 3 up, 3 down, filling in the holes, I was surprised that his numbers were that he had only thrown for 133 yards because it had seemed like he had played, so well. I think a lot of that had to do with he had, multiple 3 and outs in the second half. And so obviously that's going to limit. You lose a possession when you don't recover the kickoff. So, that factors in a little bit too. So he might have been limited, but I don't know that I necessarily disagree with that approach. I think I did like the way that Jay Johnson utilized him in the run game. The quarterback draw was effective. They scored a touchdown on the QB draw. There was a couple other design carries for him. And frankly, as much criticism as Jay Johnson has gathered, and a lot of that deserved, other than the short yardage situations, which he continues to just struggle with. And maybe that's not even at this point, maybe it's not even a Jay Johnson thing. Maybe it's just like the mentality of this team type thing. I don't know. But other than that, I felt like Jay Johnson called a pretty good game, other than those short yardage situations. So I do think he was limited. I think the weather probably did have a big factor in that because it was coming down pretty good over there. So yeah, I think you make an astute observation there. Interested to see what that looks like if we get some better weather next weekend and going on, what the play calling will look like.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the weather obviously, played a factor, but, can they give him, obviously they're giving him the keys to the offense now. Like it seems like it's going to be riding with Hauser from here on out. I think it's safe to say that. So
sure.
Kind of how do they unlock this offense a little bit more? Because, there was someone in the comments that said, the team still looks like they play hard and they still look like they give it effort and play for each other. And, you can see that. And, they're all in the same, bad situation that, I wouldn't wish anyone to be in. And, kudos to them for, sticking with it and not transferring. But yeah, how do they make this right? How can they, motivate these guys that they can still get to that bowl game and, maybe pull off an upset. So yeah, figuring that out. And, if especially against Michigan, you're going to have to pull out a lot of, stuff that they haven't seen before. And you're going to have, everyone's going to have their best performance of the season if you even want to think about, covering the spread. And that I say that wholeheartedly, and not as an insult. So
sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's part of, and not that we would expect Michigan State to win, this upcoming Saturday, regardless of what happened yesterday. But there was another factor or another thing that you lose with the way that game ended was, you had a chance to get a little bit of positive energy going into the rivalry week. And, maybe, people come to practice and they're a little bit more dialed in and a little bit more excited because you finally got the monkey off your back, and all of that goes away now. And not only goes away, but the way it happened, I can't even imagine what the mentality and the mindset is for the locker room right now, for the roster, and having to turn it up and get ready for a rivalry game when you're going to be a heavy underdog doesn't bode well. I'll just say that. We'll do more on Wednesday about that whole thing. But just a really tough way to go into this week. So, all right, Aiden, we will. I feel like, how many more questions do you have about the game itself? I guess I will ask. Or do you have any bigger picture ones?
I have half of a game question. It was it kind of referred to the defense in the fourth quarter, just with the arm tackling, and they couldn't really stop the running back. I forget his name. It was kind of funny, Manungai. They couldn't really stop him, and he had a lot of yards after contact. So just kind of my last kind of game question was, what do you do with that? Like, how does that get fixed this week? Because you're going up against, Michigan, who will be more than happy to run the ball down your throat. Sure. So how do you improve that?
Give it to me one more time, like the specific question.
Just how do you improve the tackling from last game, especially in the fourth quarter?
I feel like tackling is a tough thing to change in season. And it's funny because we've seen tackling be an issue, certainly against Washington, which that's, its own thing, but it's been kind of inconsistent. Like, there are times when they seem to tackle, pretty well, but it hasn't been consistent. I don't know how you do that in season. Because, like when you're going into a week, and if it was going to get addressed, you would think, the bye week would be a time to do it, because, you can spend a little bit more time on the fundamentals, because during that first week, you don't have an opponent to prepare for. This week's is going to go by quick, preparing for, the next opponent. So I think it's really tough. I think it's really tough to work on those fundamentals in season. It's kind of a running joke, or not a running joke, but a cliche for those of us who coach high school kids. I've told my basketball guys a lot. You get better as a player in the months between the seasons. Like, once you start the season, like you're working on understanding plays, understanding situations, but as individual skills, you get better mostly in the off season. So I don't know if that translates to football or not, like it does in basketball, but I think it's really tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, this is a thing that they struggled with, that they've struggled with all season, and it really feels like it came out in the fourth quarter, and were really exposed by a guy who ran hard, and that he was hard to stop, but I think he could have easily been prevented. You watch film from the other Rutgers games, and other teams stopped them when they tackled well, and that's something that MSU really needs to improve on. And I think a guy, like Darius Snow, I didn't see him play a ton, but he's a guy who was a sure tackler when he was healthy. I think he was first or second in the team in tackles in 2021, and a guy like him could have helped them a lot. And Jordan Hall and Cal Halliday gave it their all, and they still struggled. So yeah, right. that hurts.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It did seem like, and Halliday kind of jumped out a little bit because it did seem he struggled at times, and he's a guy who, at least against the run and things like that, has excelled. And so again, right. I think I can't imagine what's going on in the heads of these players right now.
Right.
With everything that's happened, and now the losing streak. I think how it is when you struggle with motivation. Like, it can be a hard time. It can be hard to do anything effectively, much less play at a D1 football level. So I think that's a good a good point there. I didn't want to. This was almost going to be one of my burning questions. I passed it up, but Cameron asked it in the comments, and it's about the quarterbacks. I think it's a good question, so let's address this one. We don't have to spend a ton of time here, but do you think there's a current quarterback on the roster who is the quarterback of the future? I'll let you go first, Aiden, and then I'll respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I think watching Hauser's performance, it can be him.
Right.
What we've seen in terms of the pedigree of Sam Levitt, obviously being, high school Gatorade Player of the Year in Oregon and, another high 4-star guy. It can be one of those two. And it's really going to just the biggest question is just going to be, who are they going to hire next? And is that hire going to keep one of those two at least? Because I think you have to. And it's whether or not, one of those guys are still willing and on board.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's hard to say definitively because we don't know which guys will be here. But I think one of the top priorities for whoever is the next hire is to keep one or both of these young quarterbacks in the fold, because most times when a new coaching staff comes in, and this is even before the transfer portal era, a lot of times when you come in, you don't have that quarterback. Like you don't have you're I'm just thinking of, like, to use an example from the team up the road, like when Rich Rod was hired at Michigan State, I think his first quarterback was like Stephen Threet or something like that. And that's the level typically, and then you have to recruit your guy, and then he gets on campus maybe by year 2, and maybe it's not till year 3 before your guy, if you recruited a good one, like, can be the guy. That's not really the case here. I think, like, you have a couple options who were quality 4-star recruits out of high school if you can keep them on campus. So I think that's one of the top priorities for the next head coach. Sticking with quarterbacks briefly, JJ did mention wondering about Hauser's health. I don't think Harlan Barnett was asked about Hauser at the end of the game. I don't remember the play. It does seem like he kind of limped off a little bit, but I was already writing my story at that time, probably, or at least parts of it. So I can't speak directly to maybe if Hauser is okay. I expect he is. I hope he is, but did want to point that out. All right, let's see here. Okay, so let's move on to my next burning question, which is more of a bigger picture question, and it does speak to the coaching search. So this is a nice kind of little transition there. We've been in this now for a few weeks where we've kind of understood that Michigan State's going to have a new head coach in 2024. A lot of names have been thrown out. You've written about several. I've written about a couple. Working on a story myself right now for another batch of candidates as well. So I guess my question to you, Aiden, is, of all the rumored names or all the names that have been suggested, and as we've had time to kind of reflect, who's the guy that you like the most for this job, that you think is realistic at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one because I go back and forth between kind of what does Michigan State need in terms of a head coach, because you think of the previous coaches that have been successful here. It's, they're defensive guys, defensive minded, Big Ten football kind of S guys. And then you look at, the performances and you're like, this offense is struggling. And you can tell the last couple of years the defense struggled, but it seemed that it was more of a talent deficit than anything. And now the talent is better, and schematically, could they improve? Sure, but they have enough talent there to hold their own. And then now offense, it's like they have the talent, it seems to be, but it's kind of putting it in place and figuring it out. So do you want an offensive coach? Do you want a defensive coach? Kind of where do you go from there? It's really hard. I think right now I wasn't as high on Jonathan Smith early on in the season. I think he's grown on me the past couple weeks in terms of who I would want. I know Charles Huff is another big name in terms of that as well, and I think those two guys right now have really stood out to me as, you know, the top two candidates of who I'd want at the moment. I'm sure my opinion will change,
Sure.
you know, next week and the weeks after, but I think right now Jonathan Smith and Charles Huff are probably my top two options.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And Jonathan Smith was my answer to this question too. I just think, you know, Oregon State was in a really, was just not a good program before he got there. You know, he's an Oregon State alum. I think it is tough. Like, that's what makes it tough about Jonathan Smith is, can you pull him away from his alma mater? But the Pac-12's misfortune of being pretty much dissolved, that is beneficial towards Michigan State, specifically if you're targeting Jonathan Smith, because you can throw a whole lot more money at him than Oregon State can. And he's proven he's been at Oregon State for a while now too. It's not like one of these like flash in the pan type candidates who arrives and has immediate success. Like, he has built that program up, and I feel like that's what you need in this situation, because as people have said in the comments, you've got to almost take this down to the studs. And rebuild from there. The studs hopefully being some of the talent that, you know, Tucker and his staff brought in, and building from there. So you know, Brian brings out the head coach record of Jonathan Smith. I get it, but at the same time, like, go look at what Oregon State was before he got there, and then look at the progression year to year that he's had at Oregon State. And obviously he has an understanding of the program, having, you know, played there and things like that. So you lose that a little bit by bringing him over. But as far as like the building blocks and building it up, I'm hard pressed to find what I see as a realistic option who can do those things. See, he'd be my answer right now. But as you said, like, this is going to change and evolve as time continues to go on. There was one other comment I wanted to address, I thought. It's just Gary Ellis. You know, Aiden does coach tight ends at Hazlitt High School, so he's got a little bit of experience, and he can do the job much less money than $95 million. I think I can say that with a lot of certainty that he wouldn't demand that kind of salary. So
yeah.
All right, moving on. Give me your next burning question here, Aiden.
Yeah, I think my last question is just kind of, I don't know. I guess what do you tell the team, you know, leading up to this Michigan game? I guess what is the conversation that's had?
Yeah. That's tough because I wonder, and I think this is just human nature, I wonder if any messaging that the coaching staff has at this point is kind of falling on deaf ears. And if that is the case, that, you know, that's not anything, that's speculation, that's just me talking. But if that's the case, I don't know how you change that. Like, I feel like by getting a win, that would help, you know, change that conversation. But I think it's really tough. I think it's tough. But it comes down to the leadership that you have in that locker room. I think, you know, we've talked about this before, like the whole team led thing and how that is the goal. I think the peers are probably, like, players' peers are more likely to have that influence than the coaches. Just because, like, I'm wondering where the trust factor is, I guess, between the staff and the players, and it's probably different for different position groups as well, different personalities, like who's in the room. So I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what the message is. I think, again, you find different ways to find the positive, like in individual play. You know, you do what you can, and, you know, the larger picture. The message is, you know, the larger picture will take care of itself. That kind of, again, that might fall on deaf ears right now, but I think you focus on individuals. What can you do? That would be my approach, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think Harlan Barnett as a coach was probably a good choice for the interim, just in terms of his demeanor and the way, his thought process. And he seems like a very, positive guy. And just for that reason, I think that helps a lot, especially with this team that's struggling, just having kind of that leadership role, that, that head coach role, being positive and kind of, like you were saying, take away the positives from, the small things from those specific plays, and you can build off that. And I think that's really important right now for this team, just to stay together, and making sure that you're not losing 40 guys to the portal before the Penn State game. So just kind of figuring that out. And like you're saying, like, it could be falling on deaf ears. It looks like some guys are still really invested in this team. And from what we've heard from the players, there's a lot of young players that, Nick Samac talked about that after the Maryland game. There were a lot of young players that, he thinks are super mature and have handled this situation really well. And there's a lot of, leadership and like older players that, have been vocal in trying to keep guys engaged with this team. So yeah, I mean, again, that leadership role, having Barnett there, staying positive is really important. And like you said, that player-led kind of mentality is just as important, if not more.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that as well. I've got one more burning question, and it's not really, it's kind of a silly question, so I'm not even going to ask the question, but it was more so just a transition to basketball. So this is my segue into basketball talk. The question was, will Michigan State's, basketball season kind of make up for how bad this football season has been? I will say that we are 10 days away from Michigan State's first scrimmage. They're going to host Hillsdale College. Frankly, I see the numbers as far as like our website and our Facebook page and what people are interested in, what people are clicking on, what the traffic that we're generating, and it does seem like people are ready to put this football season to bed. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. So we might make that transition to basketball a little bit more quickly than we typically would in a fall. And certainly looking forward to the basketball season, because the closer we get to basketball, the better I feel about this team. They've got depth, they've got talent, they've got a Hall of Fame coach. They've got a really good mix of veteran leadership with an influx of young talent. If there's one, and this is I'm nitpicking here, but if there's one thing that I question a little bit, it's that Joey Howitzer did bring that stretching of the floor last year from the 4 spot, and so I'm wondering where does that come from, because I don't know I look at the bigs and I'm not sure where the shooting comes from as far as that, if that's necessary. In modern basketball you want to spread the floor a little bit, but again, I'm nitpicking there. So I guess my question is, Aiden, as we're getting closer here, what's the ceiling for this team? Because we've talked about that, and we think it's the Final Four. We think they are capable of winning a national championship. So it's a very general question, but like, again, is this upcoming basketball season going to be enough to make us forget about this 2023 football season, I guess?
I hope so. I really do. I think a national championship will make everyone forget. I think a Final Four, I mean, for me personally, I can remember at least 3 Final Fours in my lifetime, and I've been alive for 5 or 6 of them. I don't know. But anyways, I've seen Final Fours, but I really want to see a national championship, and that's really kind of what I want personally. I know some people are content with Final Fours, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, I think the caliber of this team, to me, a national championship is everything, and I think that's
Sure.
the goal, and especially with that backcourt of Aikens, Walker, Hogard, and then even throwing in how well we've heard Holloman's improved a lot. You have Jeremy Fears, who McDonald's All-American point guard.
Right.
The pieces are there. Everything is
Yeah.
there. So it's just kind of you just gotta sit and watch.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about basketball is typically this is an overgeneralization, but like typically in football, you see who the best team is, and it feels like most years, or maybe there's one or two, maybe three, and going into the season, at least for the past decade or so, it's like, okay, yeah, this is the team to beat. Alabama's the team to beat. Georgia's the team to beat. Clemson's the team to beat. That type of thing. In basketball, it's a little different because there can be those super teams, but the NCAA tournament is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so it's tougher. It's tougher. You got to win more games. You got to be consistent for longer. It's a full month. You're going through March, or almost a full month, 3 weeks, that you've got to be at your best. So I guess there's more variance. With that said, not understanding that I haven't looked at college basketball rosters the same way that I typically do with like football seasons and things like that, but they're one of the favorites, and I have no bones about that. I make no bones about that. They should contend for it all this year. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but they are on the short list of teams that you look at. Okay, who could win the national championship this year? They're on that list. And I'm excited to see how it plays out, because I think we're in store for a really good season. I'm excited to see them, Michigan State and Purdue, kind of battle for supremacy in the Big Ten. I'm like, this is way out in front here, but like they play the one time in the regular season. It is in Purdue. We'll see what happens like with the regular season championship. But I would love to see those two teams again meet in like the Big Ten tournament or something like that, in the final or things like that, just because I think these are the two powers in the Big Ten this season, and I would like to see them clash as often as we can get it, I guess. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Again, we're 10 days away from the scrimmage. I think that second scrimmage against Tennessee is going to be very insightful. It's early in the year, so and who knows? Like scrimmages are obviously different than games. Izzo's rotation is probably going to be much deeper. But again, I say that though, but like Michigan State can go 11 deep, and you feel pretty good about anybody of those 11 that they throw out there. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like. And I'm excited for it. I think the fan base is rightfully excited as well. So, by the way, while we're on the topic of basketball, Michigan State did have its MSU Madness. Did you attend by any chance, Aiden, or did you?
No, we had a football game Friday.
Okay,
but I had plenty of people give me some insider who went to the game, and I asked them plenty of questions.
Yeah, give me their reactions.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just basic stuff. I mean, they had scrimmages, for both men's and women's. They said the first half seemed pretty solid, and then the second half you could tell it was kind of just like messing around and everything. But
sure.
a lot of people are really impressed. Obviously, the Cohen card, dunk videos are going around, which are unreal. But kind of seeing where Kohler was, I think that was someone who came up a lot when having conversations with people who were there. They said they really thought Kohler looked like a different player in terms of just his speed. It looked like he kind of grew into his body a little bit better, and that front court rotation is going to be really interesting. I think the biggest wild card for me right now is Xavier Booker. I think where you can play him at the we know Cohen Carr's athleticism. Mm-hmm. We know what Malik Hall can and can't do. We've seen his level of kind of consistency and what's there and what's not. And then kind of where does Xavier Booker fall into this mix? with guys. Can he play at the 4? Can he play at the 5? Obviously, I think he made 2 threes in that. From what I heard, he made 2 threes in that game, and I think he only took like 3 or 4 shots total. So he could be that stretch guy that you were talking about
Right.
to replace Joey Hauser. So we'll see what's going to happen from there.
Yeah, no, with Cohen Carr, I mean, obviously it's just ridiculous. The athleticism is unreal. Michigan State has had some high flyers, throughout its history. When we think about Jason Richardson, Shannon Brown, guys like that. As far as like an athlete and a dunker, Cohen Carr might be at the top of the heap. We'll see what it looks like in game because it's one thing when there's no defense around, which, a lot of fast breaks, things like that. But we'll see what it looks like in game. My question for Cohen Carr, I guess, would be, where is he at defensively? Because I think that's going to determine, how much he plays. Because Izzo, if you're not playing defense, not only are you not playing, but you're probably on his crap list too. So like that's obviously going to be important to see how he matches up with and just looking at like Tyson Walker, Jaden Akins, and AJ. If they're all out there, AJ can probably guard the opposing 3 because he's a bigger guard. And then you got Akins and Walker on the more traditional backcourt. And so maybe Cohen has to match up with a 4 or something like that. So obviously, you play matchups, but interested to see where he's at defensively because, man, I can't wait for the first time that AJ gets the ball and he's going up the middle and he's got Akins on one side and he's got Cohen Carr on the other. You don't know where the ball is going to go, but it's going somewhere up high. And I made the joke with somebody on Twitter this week that they might as well just take the roof off of the Breslin Center because it's going to get blown off multiple times this year. So definitely excited, looking forward to that. And yeah, with that, I don't have a whole lot else. Any final thoughts, Aiden, before we kind of pack it in for at least the next couple of days here, and then we'll be back on Wednesday.
I guess I'll have one more bonus question.
Okay.
Are we going to see the black uniforms against Michigan?
Ooh, I hope not. To be honest,
that would be a bad debut.
I feel like that's. I was worried about the black uniforms just because I've seen other teams do it or other programs do it and it doesn't really translate all the time. But when they did reveal the black unis, however long that was ago, it was like, yeah, they did a good job with these. Obviously, you want the occasion to be special. I think I'd keep them in the closet. I think I would keep them in the closet this week. Maybe for the rest of the year. I'm not sure. I'm sure they want to debut them, but I think I'd go with the all green, that traditional all green look this week. Keep the black ones in the closet, maybe bring it out for, I don't know, Nebraska's a home game. That's it, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to wear those in Detroit at the end of the year. So no, I'd leave them in the closet this weekend.
Yeah. I would agree. I think Carrie Ellis's comment would.
That's actually a very good black. You're not wrong, Carrie Ellis. You're not wrong. Yeah. With that, I guess I was trying to end things on a positive note, Aiden, and you bring us back to the football season. So no, I'm joking around, but appreciate you guys tuning in. We will see you again on Wednesday as we preview the rivalry game, Michigan State. As always, follow our coverage on our Facebook page. It's there at the bottom of the screen. You're here, our YouTube's right there. Follow us on Twitter. My handle's at the bottom of the screen. Aiden's is next to his name. And Illest Eggplant he didn't join us tonight, but he was asking at the end of the show last time where you can find our articles. Here's the link to our website, www.si.com/college/Michigan State. That's where you can find the majority of our content. It's usually we post that to our Facebook page as well. So go and check that out. We appreciate the support from you guys. And we'll see you next time on the Spartan Nation Podcast.